Ah, the carnival, a place of joy, laughter, and unforgettable memories. But beneath the surface of brightly lit rides, the smell of sweet cotton candy, and the echoes of cheerful music, lies a world of hidden terror. You might think a trip to the carnival is all fun and games, but tonight, I will show you a side of the carnival you've never seen. This is based on true events, and whether you believe them or not, it doesn't really matter, because these stories come from those who lived through them or barely escaped. Welcome to the haunted carnival, into the realm of Mr. Scary Guy. Prepare yourself for a journey beyond the ordinary, into the shadows of your deepest fears. Welcome to the world of Mr. Scary Guy. My name is Jack, and what I'm about to tell you happened when I was 17 years old. It was supposed to be just another night out with my friends, filled with cotton candy, cheap carnival games, and maybe a scary ride or two. But that night at the carnival, I encountered something far more terrifying than any ride. It all started when we decided to enter the House of Mirrors. You know the kind. Twisting corridors, distorted reflections, and that eerie, flickering light that makes you question whether what you're seeing is real. It was me, my girlfriend Alice, and our two friends, Jenny and Mark. We were all in high spirits, laughing and teasing each other as we navigated through the maze of mirrors. At first, everything was normal. We saw our reflections stretch, shrink, and warp in the glass, and it was all just harmless fun. But as we ventured deeper into the maze, the laughter started to fade. The mirrors seemed to close in on us, and the reflections grew darker, more sinister. It was as if the light was being sucked out of the room. Alice was the first to notice something was off.
Guys, look at this,
She said, pointing to a mirror. We all gathered around to see what she was talking about. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just our reflections staring back at us. But then, I noticed it. There, standing behind us in the mirror, was a clown. Not just any clown, though. This one had a grotesque, painted smile that seemed to stretch too far across its face, and its eyes were dark, empty voids. It stood perfectly still, not moving an inch, as if it were part of the background. I turned around quickly to see if someone was behind us, but there was nothing there, just an empty hallway. "Did anyone see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. The others nodded, their faces pale. But when we looked back at the mirror, the clown was gone. We brushed it off as a trick of the light or maybe some kind of optical illusion. But deep down, I think we all knew something was very wrong. We continued through the maze, but the atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and the once harmless mirrors now seemed like portals to another world. A world where something was watching us, waiting. As we turned a corner, we saw it again. The clown, but this time it was closer. Its smile was even wider, its eyes more menacing, and this time, it wasn't just standing still. It was waving at us, a slow, deliberate wave that sent chills down my spine. I screamed, and we all bolted in different directions, desperate to find the exit. The mirrors seemed to multiply, and no matter where I turned, I kept seeing that clown. Closer, closer, until it felt like it was right behind me. I could hear its footsteps, the sound of heavy, dragging feet following me. But every time I turned around, there was nothing. Finally, I burst through an opening and found myself outside, gasping for breath. Alice, Jenny, and Mark stumbled out after me, their faces as white as mine. We didn't say a word, just ran as far away from that house of mirrors as we could. Later that night, we tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was all just part of the attraction, we told ourselves. Maybe the clowns were actors, playing tricks on us. But deep down, I knew better. I knew that what we had seen wasn't just an illusion. We never spoke of that night again, and I never went back to another carnival. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I can still see that clown's face staring at me from the darkness, its smile stretching impossibly wide. And I wonder, did we ever really escape that maze? Or did a part of us get trapped in those mirrors, where the clowns still watch, waiting for their next victim? It was supposed to be an ordinary road trip. My buddies and I were heading back from a weekend in the mountains, taking the scenic route to enjoy the last bits of freedom before the grind of work life resumed. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon, when we stumbled upon it. A carnival in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't on any map. There were no signs advertising it, and we hadn't seen another car or person for miles. But there it was. Lights flashing, music blaring, and rides spinning as if it were the height of summer. It seemed odd, but we were curious. And what's the harm in checking it out, right? We parked the car and walked towards the entrance, where a rusty old sign read, "The Forgotten Carnival." I remember thinking the name was strange, but I didn't dwell on it. The place had an old-timey feel to it, like it had been plucked out of the 1920s and dropped into our time. But everything was in perfect working order, even though it looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. As we entered, we noticed something even stranger. There were no people. The rides were moving, the games were set up, but there wasn't a single soul in sight. No kids laughing, no parents chasing after them, nothing. Just us, the lights, and that eerie music.
Maybe it hasn't opened yet.
My friend Tom suggested, but it didn't make sense. Why would the rides be running if the carnival wasn't open? We decided to explore, splitting up to see what we could find. I headed towards the Ferris wheel, drawn by its bright lights. As I got closer, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The seats were occupied by mannequins. Not just any mannequins, though. These were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces painted with expressions of terror. It was as if they had been frozen in their last moments of fear. I quickly backed away, feeling uneasy, and bumped into Lisa, one of the girls in our group. She had gone to check out the game stalls, but had returned pale and shaken.
You need to see this,
she said, grabbing my arm and pulling me towards the games. What I saw was disturbing, to say the least. The prizes weren't the usual stuffed animals or plastic toys. Instead, they were old, worn-out dolls with cracked porcelain faces, their eyes following us as we moved. And the worst part? The game attendants were also mannequins, but these looked even more lifelike. Too lifelike. Something's wrong here, I muttered, and Lisa nodded in agreement. We decided to find the others and get out of there, but as we made our way back to the entrance, the carnival seemed to stretch on endlessly. The pathways twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense, leading us deeper into the heart of the carnival instead of back to where we started. The music grew louder, more discordant, and the lights began to flicker, casting long, twisted shadows. The once bright and cheerful atmosphere now felt oppressive, suffocating. Panic set in as we realized we were lost in this nightmare, with no way out. We finally found Tom and the others near the funhouse, but they weren't alone. Standing with them were more mannequins, these ones dressed as carnival barkers and clowns, their painted smiles twisted into grotesque grins. And as we approached, the mannequins began to move. It was subtle at first, a slight turn of the head, a blink of an eye. But then they started to walk towards us, their stiff limbs jerking unnaturally. We ran, but no matter how fast we moved, the mannequins seemed to be right behind us, their hollow eyes staring into our souls. We made it to the entrance only to find it blocked by more mannequins. They were closing in on us, their hands outstretched as if to grab us. Desperation took over, and we fought our way through, pushing past the lifeless figures, ignoring the way their cold, plastic hands brushed against our skin. We finally burst out into the night, gasping for air, our hearts pounding. The carnival was gone. Behind us, there was nothing but an empty field. The lights and music vanished, as if they had never existed. We didn't say a word as we got back into the car and drove away as fast as we could. But the memory of that night haunts me still. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint sound of carnival music, and I wonder, was it all just a dream? Or did we really stumble upon something that should have remained forgotten? I've always loved carnivals. The bright lights, the smell of fried food, and the sound of laughter filled me with a sense of nostalgia. So, when a traveling carnival came to town last summer, I didn't hesitate to go. I grabbed my girlfriend Lucy, and we spent the evening riding the Ferris wheel, playing games, and just enjoying the atmosphere. It was one of those perfect summer nights that you don't forget easily. But what happened at the end of the night? That's something I can't forget no matter how hard I try. As we were getting ready to leave, Lucy tugged on my arm and pointed to an old carousel at the far end of the fairgrounds. "Let's ride that before we go," she said with a grin. The carousel looked different from the rest of the carnival. It was older, more worn, and the horses were chipped and faded, as if they hadn't been painted in decades. There was something about it that made me uneasy, but Lucy was excited, so I pushed my concerns aside. We bought tickets from a man at the booth, a man who barely looked up as he handed us our passes. His eyes were shadowed, his face gaunt, but I ignored it. We stepped onto the platform, choosing 2 horses side by side. The carousel was empty except for us, the other wooden animals swaying slightly as if they were alive, waiting. The music started up, an old haunting tune that didn't sound like the cheerful melodies most carousels play. It was slower, almost mournful, like something you'd hear at a funeral. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe the music was just old, like the rest of the ride. But as the carousel began to move, I realized something was very wrong. At first it was subtle. The horses creaked more than they should have, their heads jerking unnaturally with every turn. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the platform. The ride seemed to be moving slower than normal, each revolution feeling like it was dragging out longer than the one before. Lucy didn't seem to notice. She was laughing, her head tilted back as her horse gently bobbed up and down. But I could feel it. The atmosphere had shifted, and then I saw it. In the reflection of one of the mirrors that lined the carousel, I saw another figure riding one of the horses. It wasn't Lucy, and it definitely wasn't me. The figure was tall and gaunt, like the man at the ticket booth, but older, much older. His face was pale, almost skeletal, and his eyes were dark, sunken voids that stared straight ahead, unblinking. I turned around, but the horse behind us was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure was still there, staring at me now, his lips twisted into a crooked smile. My heart raced and I grabbed Lucy's arm. "We need to get off," I whispered, my voice trembling.
What? Why?
She asked, still smiling, unaware of the terror growing inside me. But I didn't answer. I couldn't explain what I had just seen, and I wasn't about to stick around to find out more. The carousel was still moving, slower and slower, but it hadn't stopped yet. I tried to jump off, but it was like my legs wouldn't move. I was stuck, glued to the saddle of that damned wooden horse. The music grew louder, more distorted, and the lights above us began to blink erratically. I could hear a faint whispering now, voices swirling around us, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. The figure in the mirror was gone, but I knew he was still there. I could feel his presence, like a cold hand gripping the back of my neck. Suddenly, the carousel jerked to a stop, throwing us both forward. I managed to break free of whatever had been holding me down, and I grabbed Lucy's hand, pulling her off the ride. We stumbled onto the platform panting, our hearts racing. The music stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of our ragged breaths and the creaking of the horses. We didn't look back as we ran toward the exit, the old man in the ticket booth watching us with that same empty stare. As we left the fairgrounds, the carousel started up again, the haunting melody following us into the night. For days after, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Lucy thought I was just overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us home. That night, I had a dream, or at least I thought it was a dream. In the dream, I was back at the carnival, standing in front of the carousel. The lights were dim, and the horses were all staring at me, their chipped eyes gleaming in the darkness. The music played softly in the background, that same eerie tune, but slower this time, almost a whisper. I could see the figure again, riding one of the horses, his dark eyes fixed on me. He smiled, and then the carousel started to spin, faster and faster until the horses were nothing but a blur. I tried to run, but I was frozen in place, just like I had been on the ride. The figure reached out a hand toward me, his fingers long and bony, and I woke up, drenched in sweat. I told Lucy about the dream, but she just laughed it off, telling me to stop watching horror movies before bed. But the thing is, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt real, like I had been pulled back to that cursed carousel, even though I hadn't set foot near the carnival since that night. A few weeks later, I found out that the traveling carnival had packed up and moved on. They left without a trace, as if they had never been there. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that music, the same slow, haunting melody that played on the carousel. I hear it faintly, drifting through the air, like a reminder that no matter how far away the carnival goes, it's never truly gone. And I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't jumped off? What if I had stayed on that carousel just a little bit longer? 3 rides, 3 encounters with the darkness that hides beneath the carnival lights. Whether it's the clowns that come alive, a forgotten carnival that never should have been found, or a carousel that traps you in its endless cycle. Next time you're at a carnival, maybe skip the last ride. This is Mr. Scary Guy saying, good night. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe by clicking the icon above. We've also got a playlist full of scary stories on your left side, and a suggested video you'll love on the right. Choose one and keep the scares going.